speaking of fame and infamy, dude, this movie.
Yes. Let's get into it, man. Right now. Yeah. Let's do it.
Let's do this.
Welcome. You're listening to Paleo Cheese Podcast, Episode 7, Part 2, David Lynch's Blue Velvet.
So, Blue Velvet, it's our second David Lynch film that we're discussing here. And it is your, you're still within your first month of losing your Lynch virginity.
No, it's been a couple months. It's been a couple, because we're on
no,
what
okay.
episode? Yeah. It's been a couple months.
Okay.
You know, but you're right. I mean, it's not very long, because we did episode 1, Wild at Heart. And then as soon as that was done, I went and I watched Eraserhead. Like I watched it. I binged Twin Peaks. I watched the entire thing. First season, second season, third season. I still I started watching Rabbits. I haven't seen the whole thing of Rabbits. I think I just didn't have time to sit down and watch it. Seems very experimental for me, right? You got Rabbits is one of those, and then he's got a new one where he's talking to a monkey. And I watched part of that. I watched about, I think, almost 10 minutes out of 17, and I was too tired. I did it really late at night. But the next one after this, because I was divided, man. I thought, man, what do I want to watch next? Blue Velvet or Lost Highway, Dune? What do I want to watch? Because I really want to watch Dune. I've never seen any of these. And I'm like, so I've wanted to watch Dune for a long time, especially Dune. But when you brought up Blue Velvet, I thought, you've said that Blue Velvet's kind of, and I've read elsewhere that Blue Velvet's kind of the movie that when people talk about him, this is like the movie.
Well, other than Eraserhead, yeah.
Yeah, other than Eraserhead, yeah. But these two movies, Eraserhead, because it was his first major movie like that, and because it was so personal, and he had kind of free reign over so much. And then Blue Velvet, because after Dune and after Elephant Man, which I'm also excited to watch, that both of those, that he wasn't super happy, man. He was especially sad going through Dune. Like it was not a good experience. And this was him coming back to that place as a director where he had control, and so much control that he even convinced the producer to give him final cut rights.
Yep.
And that was really important for him. Yeah.
That's a big thing for Lynch. And I suspect that that's why he didn't care for. I think he didn't care for Dune because it was just such a huge project, but he didn't have complete creative control. As a matter of fact, I do recall before season 3 of Twin Peaks came out, it was announced that they were going to start filming it, and that him and Mark Frost were working together. I believe that's his name.
Yeah.
And then very soon after. It was announced that this would not be happening. If memory serves, it had to do with creative control, because he was not given creative control. They couldn't work this out. And Lynch needs the floor, man. He needs the entire floor.
Yeah.
And thankfully he gets it sometimes, because then we get something that we cannot get anywhere else. So when he was finally given creative control, that's when, like, what was it? Was it Showtime or HBO that ultimately released the third season of Showtime is like, do whatever you want. But Blue Velvet, about a college kid who takes a break from school, and upon returning home finds a human ear laying on the ground in the grass in a field, and he becomes obsessed with putting together the clues of where this ear came from, and finds himself involved with some pretty shady characters, the likes of which only Lynch could create. It's directed by him. It's written by him. It stars Kyle MacLachlan, which is also from Twin Peaks and Dune, and Laura Dern and Dennis Hopper, among others. Jack Nance, of course. So this is your first time recently, yesterday or the day before, something like that, was your first time seeing Blue Velvet. And you heard me talk it up. And I know that's a dangerous thing to do, because the hype, it could ruin it. So you turn on Blue Velvet and you're sitting there, and within like the first 10 minutes, what's going through your head? What are you hating it? Are you loving it?
In the first 10 minutes, I loved it. The initial impression, for one, I love oldies music. I grew up on that. It's funny, I mentioned my upbringing a little bit earlier, talking about Christmas and stuff, and nostalgia a little bit, and conservative values and other things in the upbringing. And some of that's played out a lot in his film. That there's that feeling of,
Wholesome.
wholesome America. I mean, this is like straight up America, dude. The red fire engine with the guy waving and going by, and you got the white
picket
fence
fences
and stuff. Oh yeah, man. I mean, this is like full blown Americana stuff, and the music playing, and
hardware store,
the hardware store, the whole 9 yards. And so even young high school guy throwing rocks at one of those fire barrels. You can put trash in, or they have a little bonfire thing. And so throwing rocks at it, walking through tall grass and stuff. And so much of that, and the feel of the music, and the feel that everything's great. And then real quickly, not only something bad happening within the first couple minutes, something really bad happening. Okay. The dad ends up having a stroke. Okay. And he's laying on the ground, and he's stroked out and everything. And then, in wonderful Lynchian style, the camera goes down real super close to the grass and goes right through the dirt, and you start to see these crazy beetles and bugs everywhere and this kind of wild noise. And right away I said, I'm game. I'm down for watching this, because, and I anticipated some other issues. I knew what I was getting into, and I have some warnings for people. But at the same time, the underbelly of nostalgia, you could tell that it presents itself in a mask. It's happy, it's beautiful, it's wholesome, and yet there's a darkness. There's bugs down in the dirt. It's a little bit of a facade. It's not entirely fake, but it's not the whole story, and some of it is hidden. And that underbelly is especially true in nostalgia and in our recollections. And sometimes we like to suppress that, the reality of what it used to be like in the olden days, the golden era, and all of this. And that we romanticize it, forgetting that crazy weirdness has always been, and evil and crime and sin and wickedness prevailing. Like, all of that's been there every time in history. And he summed that up, I feel, in a picturesque way, a beautiful way, within the first 10 minutes, through specifically the sounds.
Yeah. If you're not paying close attention, you can watch this whole movie thinking that this takes place in the 50s.
Yeah.
When I would argue that it's more of an alternate universe, kind of, because the only bits that don't scream 50s, I mean, because the cars,
yes,
and from the ambulance to which looks like a Ghostbuster, mobile, to the fire trucks, to the cop cars, the other cars, just the decor, the white picket fence, all that stuff, the way that people look and kind of talk a little bit, even some of the lighting, like at night when they're going, he's walking down the street, a lot of that lighting reflects that of films made in the 50s, with the trees and all that. But if you're not paying close attention, you could think that this is just takes place in the 50s. But whenever it shows Sandy, played by Laura Dern, whenever it shows her with her friends, all of her friends have teased hair from the 80s, and they have like 80s clothes on, and she's only around them twice. She's around them at school, and they have like big 80s earrings. And then they go to a party toward the end of the movie, and all the chicks have teased out and crimped hair and stuff like that. But everything else, and I don't know why that was made like that.
It's a mix of times. And I think it's because nostalgia, when people reflect on a time, it's more of a feeling, and that feeling is not normally just limited to a specific year. It's kind of an accumulation, a composite of sensations and even postures that they may have had at those times, and posturing themselves with the world and everything. And that's what they recall from that. And I've wondered, to go back and look to find out what kind of cars those were, and to say, what years do they span? Like what year of a fire truck would that be? That's an old school looking fire truck.
Yeah.
I mean, the fire truck it looks super old, and some of the cars, none of the cars look new, right? So you don't have any situation where it's like, oh, that's a 1989 Pontiac. Like you're not seeing that. And I love those muscle cars too, man. I do. I loved Frank's car. I loved Kyle McLaughlin's car. It was also, you could tell that the car was old enough that there wasn't a seatbelt that goes across. There was no seatbelt up high, right? And so it had the bucket seats and stuff, prior to tape decks, and so you just had the radio. And I grew up with some of that, man. My dad, he had 61 and 62 Cadillacs. We had a mint condition 1962 Caddy with the big black Batman fins kind of in the back. He had ones that had the cone shaped lights and ones that had kind of the
lights.
Yeah. And so we had both versions. We had the 61 and the 62, but the 62 was in mint condition. The other ones were for parts cars.
Nice.
But it was awesome. It had the bucket seats and stuff, all original. But yeah, it was just radio. I had the dial, the old school dial on it, So yeah, it was really cool to just the initial feel right away was something that I like. That plays into my
scratches that itch for you. I had a funny thing. I thought that I had seen Twin Peaks several years ago, but what I had only seen was the first episode. And I for some reason, I lived the last 20 years thinking that I had seen it, and I only saw, I didn't see all of Twin Peaks until 2 or 3, 4 years ago. And so I finally, watched it all. And then of course, when the third season came out, I watched it when it came out. But so I haven't seen Blue Velvet since I've seen Twin Peaks. So I didn't make a lot of the wood connections and see all the similarities between Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet. And first of all, I found out later that I apparently Blue Velvet was the inspiration for Twin Peaks, and you can see that all over the place.
Yeah.
But I and I don't know if Lynch has a thing for like wood, but they live in Lumberton, and the radio station is WOOD, and then even the police station, when you go, it says Lumberton Police Station, but then under that, almost like a family crest, it has like a really crappy painting, which I believe was painted by David Lynch, of a tree limb that's just like hand painted on there. And then of course there's the scenes every time they showed the little local diner there. Every time they showed it, one of those trucks that carried logs would go by.
Yeah.
And then they had like the lumber mill there. And then, of course, Twin Peaks has, their crappy hand-painted sign with the trees all over it.
Yeah.
Agent Cooper is obsessed with needing to know what kind of trees are growing there in Twin Peaks. And then you got the lumber mill there. And then you've got the log lady, who's named after log because she carries a log around her. So there's all these weird wood references that Lynch is really into, that he uses in both worlds. I thought that was really interesting, and I hadn't caught that before.
I think a lot of people play up the idea that there's a Freudian reference to the wood and all of that, right? That it's like euphemistic, and I think that he's been accused of using those euphemistically, and I don't want to chalk it up as that. There's part of me that says, I think he knows more about psychoanalysis than he lets on. But at the same time, I think a lot of people want to see more of that than what may really be there, even with this. And I think a lot of it just has to do with the fact that there are certain things that he really enjoys about America and the American scene, and what invokes certain images like industrial parts of town. Okay, smokestacks. The same thing with logging towns. It would be, it's more recognizable even than coal mining. Plus the feel of it, the feel of a logging town, which he goes for that a lot, for the feel of something. Even for this show, that's one of the things that I was most surprised about. I don't want to get ahead of myself. But one of the things I was most surprised about this was the role of music for him as a director in real time, and how he uses music as a mechanism, as a tool to help him kind of gauge the feel of what he's seeing. And so I think he does that with certain things and recurring symbols, right? Recurring, like the logs or the diner, that kind of thing, or the muscle cars or the oldies music. I think he uses that for the familiarity of it, just like he loves making films that are American films.
Well, he's big into the industrial thing. First of all, I know he loves factories and stuff like that. He really gets off on that, and the sounds that they make and just the way that they look. But I feel like it almost feels like Blue Velvet could be almost a prequel to Twin Peaks. Kyle basically, the actor Kyle, essentially plays the same character, but graduated to being a professional,
being FBI, right?
Yeah. He's a special agent solving a murder. Even like the nightclub scenes in Twin Peaks and in Blue Velvet are very similar to each other.
And that he had a relationship with Laura Dern. And that in Twin Peaks, and that in Twin Peaks, the third season, you find out, oh my gosh, Laura Dern plays into this somehow. Going back.
Isn't Laura Dern Laura, who he's constantly talking to or Diane rather?
It's Diane, but you don't know that's who it is until season 3. It's just
right. But it's that could be, whenever he did find stuff, that's who he went and he reported to was Sandy.
Yes.
And then same kind of thing. When he finds something out, whether it be where to get damn fine coffee or whether it be something about the case that he's working on, then he tells Diane. But played by the same actress. So even like the red curtains are in Blue Velvet too, like in the nightclub scene. They look very similar.
And in the apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're red curtains there, and it's thick and it's kind of that dark, almost blood red. Where the windows open and the wind is coming through, Yeah. It almost looks like the curtain call you'd see for a theater,
So a bit of trivia I did learn today that in the original script, the original ending, Dorothy, played by Isabella Rossellini, commits suicide in the original script.
I also heard the original script was like 4 hours long.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it involved like drug trafficking and stuff. Like it was. Yeah. And they had to like gut a lot of it.
Another sex scene on the roof and stuff like that.
And there was a nipple burning scene.
Yes.
And he said it bummed him out that he had to take that out, kind of like nobody made him take anything out. He had final cut. So he was able to do whatever he wanted with this. But he said, you watch some stuff and you just go, it's maybe too far. And they made him, I believe, take the part out of Eraserhead, where there's this weird erotic scene where two women are kind of tied up on a bed and there's like electricity or something with it going on, shocking and stuff. And so they took that out of Eraserhead. And then in this one, they took out a scene where a lady basically burns her nipple. And he talked about how they did that. Like, how do you burn a nipple without burning yourself? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that? And so it was kind of a neat trick. He actually, in a rare moment, he admitted how they did that. Because he's pretty secretive about stuff like that. Yeah, he likes to. But he said that in a way, though, it wasn't his idea. It was actually something brought up by the woman in the movie. And there are some people in this movie. A lot of the people in the crowd and the backdrop people, the extras. Those are locals. Like a lot of those people are actually locals. I thought that was really interesting. And there's like a whole bunch of things actually that I learned about this movie that were, fun little factoids, how he met Isabella in a restaurant,
right?
And it was just kind of, it was actually originally going to be a different woman. The part played by Laura Dern, the people they wanted originally to have, what's the girl's name from Pretty in Pink? What's that girl's name?
Oh yeah, they wanted Molly Ringwald.
Yeah, they wanted Molly Ringwald. Yeah, and
Yeah,
the
but Molly's parents were like, no.
yeah, they read the script and they're like, oh heck no. Yeah.
Willem Dafoe was actually considered for Frank Booth
Until Hopper said, "This is me," and they were nervous about him.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were nervous because he had a reputation, man. He was a drug user. He would use drugs and alcohol to get into character.
But
and
he had
stuff.
just
And
gotten
so,
out of treatment. He had just gotten out of treatment. Was kind of doing a little comeback for himself. And I think it's weird that my two favorite movies of his, he did Hoosiers, which I actually haven't seen, but he did Hoosiers, River's Edge, and I haven't.
Oh, bro.
River's Edge and in Blue Velvet. And River's Edge is one of my absolute all-time favorite movies. And his character in that is whacked out too. Not evil whacked out. You kind of feel sorry for him, but a really neat character. And I can't see anybody playing it other than Dennis Hopper. And I absolutely can't see anyone playing Frank. Booth. I mean, dude, he just
not even Defoe.
It's one of my favorite antagonists ever.
He's wicked, and
I mean, it would be a completely different thing.
It's crazy because there's the gas that he's huffing, right? And he comes up with it because originally going to be helium. That was the original. That was David Lynch's idea, that he would, when he's huffing this gas, that when he's, he puts this thing on his and he's huffing it really hard, in the sensual way, getting himself real worked up and everything, that when he would take it off, his voice would be like really high pitch and stuff. And it was funny listening to Hopper talk about that, and for him to say, and for them to go, it's actually kind of more messed up if you think about it, the way that Lynch's brain is with this, because, at least with this gas, it's getting him sexually. Like, that's something people will use for sexual stuff, it's like using that punch and balloon nitrous stuff, bunch of whippets or whatever, and doing it. There's a sensual dynamic sometimes to that party stuff, but helium, he's like, that's not even giving you any high. That's just changing your voice. So that makes the person who's doing that real cuckoo crazy. I mean, that's like, whoa. And to get in the mood where you're saying, mommy, 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 and with that voice, and I'm thinking that would be dark, dude.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
To clarify, it was Dennis Hopper's idea to, I think they were going to overdub his voice or whatever using helium, and that was supposed to represent helium. And Dennis Hopper was like, well, how about this? I can't remember the name of the stuff, but how about this other stuff? And Lynch was like, what is that? So Hopper told him, and Lynch was like, all right, well, we'll see how that goes, and maybe not, put your voice in there. And so they stuck with that. I think because Lynch was concerned that people might laugh when they're not supposed to, because, and I can see that happening, because while Dennis Hopper's character, Frank Booth, was very scary, he was also funny when he would talk, when he would talk about Pabst Blue Ribbon and, really memorable lines in there.
Oh my gosh, dude. It was hilarious because he goes, Heineken, that, Pabst Blue Ribbon. And he says it like in this really, really crazy way that's just so funny, man. Like Pabst Blue. Like it's like this really intense thing. And and there's a couple references, and in fact, people have tried to, I've read some people doing analysis that say that the different beers that people drink kind of show different parts of the ego and the id and the SuperEgo for Freudian stuff. Because you have three mentioned. You have the dad, the fatherly figure in this, drinks Bud, the king of beers, and then you've got Heineken, which is the younger guy, the ego of the film.
The hipster German beer.
Exactly. And then you've got the Pabst Blue Ribbon, right? And so you've got, that's
white
Frank.
Trash Americana.
So I've actually read some cool analysis, man, about how the beers indicate different parts of the psyche. And
I didn't read that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But Frank Booth, man, that character is one of my favorite antagonists of all time. He's just so memorable, and I'm just whenever I see scenes with Hopper in him, I'm just blown away by how, I mean, like when that dude is singing that the candy coated clown song or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And he's just standing there looking at him, and he can hardly keep it together. Like it hits him so emotionally hard.
Yeah, Dean Stockwell sings that song.
And then when they're on the beach or whatever it is, and not the beach, but when they go for the drive, and that chick is doing that dance on the car, and the song's playing again.
Yeah. I think that's where my wife lost it. I think she was already at a place where she's like, this is dark. You know what I mean? She enjoys different types of film. And this one was one of those where she's like, what is happening? Like, what am I enduring with this? But that once it got to the scene where the woman is dancing on the top of the car and he's getting his butt kicked out in public and stuff. I think it's interesting though, that Lynch didn't want people to laugh at parts of the movie that he didn't think people should laugh. But it was during that scene that he laughed.
The rape scene, he laughed.
The rape, yes, yes. And people, even Isabella Rossellini, the actress who played that role, and I don't know why she got flack. Personally, I loved the way she played that, and I especially loved the scene where she finds out, that Jeffrey's in the closet, and she gets him out, and she's yelling at him with that knife, and she's on it, man. There's an intensity in her and a brokenness. Her whole character I thought was amazing.
I think the flack that she got was just from herself. I don't think she was kind of creepy, so that it's not sexualized, the fact that she's naked.
Yeah.
She blamed herself for how it came out.
But think about this though, man. Think about number one, this is like the second film she's done, right? She did one that was White Nights or something.
Yeah.
And now she's in this thing with this really popular guy and all of this and kind of taken by surprise about it. And she's really familiar with modeling, but nothing really beyond that. And they have her singing, and she's not a trained singer. In fact, she's not a very good singer. And she admits it. She playfully admits, I'm not even a good singer. And I think that it's kind of like you brought up with Wild at Heart, where sometimes Lynch almost thrives on that people aren't so good, and sometimes they may have to make the actor say, look, don't play the part so well, your acting needs to be just off a little bit, right? And her singing was that, right? But I felt that her acting in the whole thing, I felt like her acting was so good. But when the way that her brain thought, when she said she wanted to come down the steps at the end, and she's coming down in front of the Jeffrey's parents' house, and she's walking out, and she has her arms kind of held in a way where the palms would be facing forward, right? A helplessness. And in a documentary, Mysteries of Love, the way her brain worked about this, that she said that she wanted to embody something similar to the picture of the young girl during the Vietnam War, right? Where she's running and she's naked and she's got her hands out. That's what she was trying to do. But she thought of that. And so to get flack and her agents, dude, they dropped her, man, like it was hot. As soon as they watched that, as soon as the screening was over, they're like, we don't want nothing to do with you. And I thought, people can have criticisms of the film. They can think that Lynch once again has gone too far. There's some disturbing junk in there. But I feel like people really took that out on her in a wicked bad way. And so I was glad to see that Lynch stuck around with her. In fact, they dated for a while after that,
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. They dated for a while, and that she was in Wild at Heart. Yeah. And I'm glad he did, because I think she did excellent, and she did a really good job, and very compelling actress in a very, very difficult role in a very controversial movie. Let me say this too, man, is that I thought it was really cool. Something I learned in this process about Lynch and how this movie was an awakening for him musically, that he'd always loved music, but that he was frustrated as a director because you do all the different shots and stuff, and he's thinking through the look and the feel and the mood, and then you send it to the people who are going to do the composing, and they make a bunch of the music and they overlay it, and then by the time a director is going to hear it, at least in the past, you're number one, you're pretty detached from it. You kind of just have to trust the person doing the composing, and then it's already into post-production, and you're like, oh no, we got to hurry up and get it done. And so he took a more central role in this, where he worked with what's the guy's name? Well, he worked with the sound designer, Alan Splett. And I think the sound is amazing. I love the industrial noises that he brings in the roaring sounds, like during the sexual encounter that turns not only into that kind of roaring and almost a dinosaur
animalistic
primal, very primal, to then all of a sudden having Frank, and Frank is roaring. And there's a scene too where it's a distorted father, his face, the distorted father, which is, there's a good reason. I know I dogged the euphemistic stuff earlier. There's good reason for a lot of the talk about the Oedipus stuff in this film. There's no question about it. But the sound designer, but there was also Angelo Badalamenti. He was the guy that came in, did the score for it, worked on a bunch of the music, which was amazing. The way that they made even Blue Velvet, how they made it theirs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
they ended up using the original. I'm thinking of the other song. I'm thinking of the other song.
He got involved with it, even down to the lyrics. And there's a song in there about dreams with these lyrics. And man, I loved it. When I heard it, I wanted to know what the song was. I'm like, I haven't heard that song before. That's because they wrote the lyrics for it.
There is a song almost exactly like that. Same feel, same kind of Enya feel. That's what I got out of it. I thought it sounded like Enya. On the Twin Peaks soundtrack. I don't know from what episodes, but it's on the soundtrack. It sounds just like that song that's in Blue Velvet, the one that you're talking about, the Dreams one.
Frank, one thing I thought was really amazing about that involves the two of them is Dorothy's singing Blue Velvet, and she's up on the stage. And the way that I can just put these two together, that the way that Lynch wanted to portray her was that even when they showed her body, that she wouldn't be glamorous. And when she's singing, that she didn't have a natural glamour, that she's painting stuff on. She's pretty, but broken, imperfect. Her voice is not stunning. It's not like she's going to have a career doing this, so she doesn't have stuff to fall back on. So she's that, and they kept invoking the idea of that doll, which they did in Wild at Heart 2, the scene of the accident, talking about a porcelain doll feel to that he's trying to invoke this with her. And she's singing this, she's up on the stage at something that looks like the Roadhouse from Twin Peaks. But as she's singing, she looks over and she sees Frank, and Frank is sitting there, and Frank is crying. And in the interview, she was saying that she did not know that he was going to do that. Mm-hmm. And that Hopper, that it was one of those moments where as he's doing that and the cameras turn around and they're facing Hopper, and she knew that it was on him, that she's looking straight at him and heightening that by looking at him intimately and singing for him. And he's looking at her and he's crying.
One criticism I do have about what you're talking about right now with how he loved her is that I didn't really connect that he was that in love with her until after watching the documentary. I just got that the guy was crazy, and that he, everything was of a sexual manner rather than love. And even when he, when they went for the car ride and she was along, she wasn't like the focus of his attention by any means. It was more about the music, and even to where he's like standing right up in that guy's face watching this guy. It wasn't about Dorothy. And so my only criticism I have about that is if Lynch wanted us to believe that Frank Booth loved her that much to where it was just he couldn't handle it, I just feel like maybe a couple of things could have been done to portray that a little bit better. Not that we need to be having some kind of empathy for him, but I think that it would have been a cooler dynamic had we been more aware that he's not just crazy, but that this is actually about her. Because they touch on that a little bit when she says that she wants to kill herself, but he's doing this to keep her alive. Yeah. But for all we know, he's into rape fantasies or whatever, and he just wants to rape her. I never got any indication that this was about her and that he was just so in love with her. I do have a theory on one scene in there that I picked up on that I thought was symbolic. You talk about the Oedipus, what is it, complex?
Yeah, the Oedipus complex.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of mommy going on in this.
Yeah, where essentially someone wants to have sex with their mother or have that intimacy with the womb again or something.
It's more complex than that, but at the same time, yeah, the idea is that the connection that the son has with the mother from birth and from nursing, and then resentment at times, and the separation that ultimately happens between a father and learning that, oh my gosh, my dad is really with my mom, like, and that Freud believed that this was kind of what made the world go round.
Well, I don't know if Lynch did this on purpose, but I thought that there was some continued symbolism with that in the rape scene. I mean, you've got him saying mommy, which is, I mean, just blatant and obvious. But when he takes that rope that you would tie her blue velvet robe around with, he stuffs one end in her mouth and then one end in his mouth and then rapes her. And I thought that was symbolic of an umbilical cord.
There's a whole bunch of that. And I would, I have a couple of these papers that were done academically that I just didn't have time to read, that went deeper into the psychoanalytic dynamic of this and Oedipus and the like. And I'm interested to see if there's analysis that would say that the dad and Jeffrey and Frank are the same person.
I know what you're saying. I don't really buy any of that. I don't think it goes that deep.
I'm just on the fly. I might be completely talking out of my rear end.
She is. I mean, she misses her husband. Yeah, and there's this about as wholesome as you can get, dude. He's practicing some voyeurism, not on purpose, really. He doesn't have a boner for her per se. He has a boner for solving this case, and that's why he's there. He's not, he's only in the closet watching because he has to, really. But he's about as wholesome as you can get, and she recognizes that there's no threat here. Misses her husband, calls him, and kind of pretends, does this role playing thing because it's she needs him, wants him so bad, and pretends that's him. And she does ask at one point for him to hit her because she's all kinds of messed up, just like Frank Booth is. We don't know exactly why. I would gather that stems probably back when she was a child. Maybe she was messed with, and that tends to really screw somebody up. But he won't do it. The part that he's crying is when he finally breaks down and he does hit her the second time they hook up. He's just so confused. He's having fun because he's getting laid, and by this beautiful woman, and he's having a good time. And then she's like, hit me. And this is the second time that she's asked him to do this. So he finally kind of gets frustrated and does it, and realizes that he let this evil side of him come out, and feels really bad because, he's thinking with a little head and not the big one. And so finally, when that's over and he's at home, he's like, man, she's going through hell. What am I thinking? Why would I do that? Even if she asked me. And so, he broke down. But
I guess the only thing I would say is that I've read in the book, when he's talking about it in the book that I've got, that Lynch on Lynch, there's this idea that when he talks about light and dark, and when he talks about the nostalgia of the pristine white picket fence and the growiness of what's in the earth, the underbelly, that these opposites that he pushes them both to extremes because he believes that they're actually essentially complementary to each other. And that they need to be almost synthesized to be fully understood. And that even their characters, like Laura Dern's character and Isabella's character, that there's an imbalance, and that it balances itself. And then Frank and Jeffrey, that their characters have that darkness and light, and that the two of them, that there's a relationship between those, like a shadow, right? Like an archetype in the shadow, which we've mentioned before. It just made me wonder about that. And so I'm interested to read. more about it and to see what people say. But the movie overall, you know, and as a warning, right, to the viewers who are wondering, hey, should I watch it? You know, it's good to go to IMDb and check out the parental stuff on there for this one, because it's kind of all mainly at one part, really, if you think about it. The sexuality in it it takes up a pretty decent sized chunk of time. There's actually two, I guess. There's two scenes that are pretty intense. And one of them lasts for probably 5 minutes. I mean, it's, you know, but it's multiple different things taking place. It's not just a sex scene for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And so, but I would encourage that. But the movie is deep. It's personal. It's awesome.
How about a rating? Let's get a rating from you. What do you rate out of 5 stars? What do you rate David Lynch's Blue Velvet?
I would say probably a 4.7. You know, 4.6, 4.7.
So you've changed a little bit then.
Yes, I did actually.
First time we talked very briefly, and you put it at the out of a list of 4 things that you've watched of David Lynch, you put it at the bottom.
Well, it might still be. I mean, Twin Peaks, I'd put it at 5. So Twin Peaks is a 5. You know, Wild at Heart, I loved it. I forget what I gave Wild at Heart. I don't remember the rating. But you're right. When we talked about it, I was like, I don't know, man. I don't like it as much as you know these ones, Eraserhead and whatnot. But the thing is that it was funny because in the book they talk about how the screening of it was terrible. It was really, really, really bad, and people were like, you know, somebody should shoot him, right? I mean, people were really mad about it and didn't like it. And was picketed in different places and stuff. But that. There was a person from the New Yorker, a woman writer, who basically encouraged people to give it a second watch, and said if you watch it a second time, you know, your first time, your gut reaction is going to be like, number one, what the heck did I watch? Especially if you've never seen Lynch before, you might even be revolted. You might be like, what in the heck is this? Because you're anticipating nostalgia and, you know, everything else, and you're getting this crazy story, you know, weird. Why are there Franks in the world kind of thing? But if you watch it a second time, and if you really think about it, and you're not just simply a passive receiver of bizarre images and storylines, but you really think about it, I'm not saying you're going to love it, but I would say that you won't throw it in the heap. You know, you will probably be more generous than Ebert was. And Ebert just, I think he had a thing, man. He just didn't like Lynch or something. He didn't like Lynch's stuff.
He also called it a comedy, which I don't understand.
Well, he called it a comedy, and there is, I guess, there is a little bit of sense to this, a little bit. And I actually took a screenshot of what Ebert said. Yeah, so he said this at RogerEbert.com. Blue Velvet contains scenes of such raw emotional energy that it's easy to understand why some critics have hailed it as a masterpiece. A film this painful and wounding has to be given special consideration. And yet those very scenes of stark sexual despair are the tip-off to what's wrong with the movie. They're so strong that they deserve to be in a movie that is sincere, honest, and true. But Blue Velvet surrounds them with a story that's marred by sophomoric satire and cheap shots. The director is either denying the strength of his material or trying to diffuse it by pretending it's all part of a campy in-joke.
You know what sucks about that? That whole thing he just said? He's laying rules and guidelines to art. And David Lynch is not about that. If you read that, to me, he's saying this doesn't belong here. It belongs with this. And if you do that, if you follow this rule and then stick it in this template, then it will work. And I couldn't disagree more.
But I at least understood what he was saying. And I can understand the mindset of that kind of a critic. I'm with you though on this to say, you know, even if it ended with a badumps, like that there was something super terrible that happened, right? Really graphic, super emotionally charged. And then it was badumps. To me, I would say that's comedic relief. And that seeing it in this way allows you to process it in a way that might be more realistic and not just so emotionally charged to where you're processing it through this like supercharged thing of, oh my gosh, what did I just watch? Right. And there is an argument to say that, you know, certain acts warrant that. You know, like take the Holocaust, right? It would be difficult to imagine too many Schindler's List with the badumps, you know, in there to say, well, it's easier to talk about the Holocaust if we have a funny joke following, you know, somebody getting killed or something. But at the same time, we do have that a little bit. We have that with things like Family Guy, where Peter's eating a chip while the Nazis are coming in trying to find, and he's in there, and they're all like, all the Jewish people down in the cellar, like, bah! And he's sitting there, and he very slowly goes and he eats another chip again. That's totally terrible if you think about it. And that's the Holocaust. But yet at the same time, we're able to have conversations about that. And it's stirring the conversation. People are having serious conversations about this exact topic. So it did, in fact, create an environment to talk about that. And yet it didn't feel like, you know, people could actually sit around and watch this film. I don't agree with Ebert on it, but again, I can understand.
Yeah.
What do you give this, man? Like, you've seen it before. You saw it. You saw it back in the day, right? I think I was watching E.T. or something, man. I was like 8 years old, dude. And so you're watching this bugger, and then years later you come back to it again, and you watch it, and you watch a documentary. Have you ever seen that documentary before, Chad?
No.
No. So this is the first time you'd seen that documentary.
Yeah.
What did you think of the film? Like,
well, when I first saw it, like I said, I saw it when it first came out. And even then, man, I think I saw it with my dad, and we were just a huge fan of all kinds of stuff that was, you know, indie or disturbing, gory, whatever. And I didn't need to. It hadn't achieved this cult status that it has, but to me, it already felt like it. I loved it. I thought it was great. I mean, I was only like 16 when I saw it, so there were some things that maybe didn't really affect me as much as it did later on. But David Lynch was just kind of starting to do his thing, and then he would go on to do Wild Heart. So it was like something I hadn't seen before, and to me, it was already had cult status, and I loved it then, and it seriously holds up so well for me. And I just can't get over Dennis Hopper's acting in this. He does such a good job that in the documentary, he states there was absolutely no improv at all. Everything he said was in the script. I would have never have thought that.
Except for certain things. He said the hand gesture.
Yeah, but the dialogue.
Yeah. The dialogue was all natural.
Was all written down.
Yeah.
And that just goes to show how amazing he was in it. I mean, I like it more now. You know, I saw it again. I think it was last year. I like it more now than I did then, and I liked it a lot then. But when I put it on again, like last year, I got really excited when I remembered what the movie was about, because it had been so long since I'd seen it. Because I love the idea of an independent investigation and all of the sneaking and stealthy stuff that is involved with that, of not getting caught, and you are the good guy being sneaky. And I that excites me. I like that. It reminds me of when I was a kid and I would spy on neighbors, and we would, you know, sneak around and try not to get caught and do all that stuff. So watching Jeffrey do that, you know, it was exciting to me, and I liked it. But the highlight for me was every scene that Dennis Hopper was in.
Yeah.
He was so crazy. There's no other character like him. Yeah. And I can't fathom anyone else doing. I don't care who it is. Willem Dafoe. Nobody could have played that character as well as Dennis Hopper. All that said, I would give it probably 5, man, or very close to it. I would love to see, honestly, a Blu-ray come out that has the overdubbed original helium trick that they were going to use.
Yeah.
Just to see what that would be like.
But that,
you know, would it be that creepy, or would it be hilarious? Would it be like that? And I think that Lynch wanted to use that thing so bad that eventually he did in a very random scene in Wild at Heart with that guy at the bar, because he ended up
He
doing
used
that.
the heel. Yes, he used the heel.
Well, he used it.
Well,
It was more like a
yeah.
sped up.
Yeah.
Yeah, more like a chipmunk.
Saying like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so is there anything that important that you feel that you took away from watching Blue Velvet? Any kind of moral?
You know, I don't want to keep quoting this book, but I do want to quote this book because I felt like, watching it, I had a lot of thoughts but I felt like my thoughts really got honed in when I began reading different articles and things like that. Now, people who are watching the videos, they'll see that a lot of the quotes or articles and the people who write them, that those are there's screenshots of those that will appear in the video. But there's a quote about this when talking about people's reaction to the film, and even my own, and even my wife, right? The reaction, and even people who are watching this who may have seen it and go, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're talking about this," or whatever. People who may go and watch it and go, "Dude, what did this guy convince me to do?" I want to leave them with this because I think that it's something that was really good. Lynch was asked about politics and religion about this. He said there's a political issue to this. Chris Rodley, okay, from this book. And he says, even if you're not particularly politically motivated, the work inevitably has a political dimension when it's released into the culture. And it's a little bit of an extended quote, but, forgive me. He says, if you're a politically motivated or thinking person, you'll see everything that comes out in terms of politics. If you're a very religious person, you'll see everything that comes out in terms of religion or religious things. So you just have to concentrate on your work and put it out. I think politics are at one level, and if you don't go above that level, you're going to be stymied and frustrated. It's the never-ending dilemma, the no-win situation. Two sides so opposed, so articulate, but one doesn't listen to the other, and things never change. And anything that makes a difference happens outside of it anyway. It just seems like a horror story. And this blew my mind, this part here. He says, Rodley says, I don't even like to use the phrase political correctness because I think it's an invention of the right. But what does that phrase mean to you? Right. So in response to this, and he goes, I'll tell you what it means. It's almost an evil satanic plot. It's a diabolical thing. It's this false way of not offending anyone. To be politically correct is to be so sort of lukewarm and in this weird little spot where there's no offense committed. It's like hiding. And, the moral of this, to me, being an admittedly nostalgic dude, okay, I am nostalgic in a lot of ways, is that I like classics. I like classical music. I like muscle cars, man. I like those big, heavy tanks that are super, you get in an accident with them things, dude, and the car ain't hurt, but you might be mangled, right? But the car is fine. And the gas guzzler, man, I love that era. I love the style. I love the feel of it. But at the same time, as I've grown up, and as I've gotten older, and as I've seen life in the world, I've begun to see more of that underbelly, and not to flee from it. There's been times where I've been so revolted by it that I've to fall into an escapism. And I feel like this movie is a good reminder that there's a place for escapism. We're watching a movie, but at the same time, to make it so that we recognize the problems that persist. We recognize how some of that even affects us individually, and that we don't keep ourselves from looking at it, and that we admit these forces, that we admit the presence of them, the foundation of them, even going way back in time, and that in doing so, we can have realistic conversations on how to better ourselves and how to better our world. And I think it's this movie is a great mechanism for seriously minded people to do that.
All right, man.
It's not very funny. No. So I got super serious, man. I was on a level with everybody. What did you take away from this, man? Is there a moral to this story, dude? Is it am I looking too deep into this? Is there something deeper?
Essentially, I think so. I think you know, I have moments where, I miss my mom. I don't see her as much as I'd like. But I think that what I took away from here is if I'm ever having one of those moments, I think all I have to do is maybe huff some amyl nitrate, and the nearest woman becomes my mom, and I'm good to go.
And the thing is, man, I'm like taking you so seriously because I'm coming off the tail end of this real serious, heartfelt moment, and you're talking about your mom, and I'm like, oh yeah, man, he's talking about his mom, and I think it's a safe moment to take a drink. And I'm sitting there, and as soon as you say that, dude, I practically choked on it. Oh, yeah, dude. Yeah, you don't want to have a mommy moment up in the.
No.
Oh my gosh. Well, man, thank you so much for encouraging me to watch this, actually, and for getting me into David Lynch, dude. It's actually changed my life in a lot of cool ways, man. It's made me more interested in painting. It's reinvigorated my interest in music and moods with writing, broadened my horizon with trying to get the tone of characters and focusing on things like light and darkness and shadows and stuff like that. And it's been a real fountain of creativity diving into this stuff, man, whether it's Wild at Heart or Twin Peaks, and we should eventually down the road, man. I don't know if we can do a Twin Peaks one because there's like a 4-hour long analysis of the show that supposedly ruins it for everybody. It says this is the meaning in 4.5 hours. But I'm really grateful, man. You definitely have had a big impact on my life, not only with your writing and stuff, with Skullface Boy and stuff, which is Lynchian. And even my son today saw the back in the description, man, and he's like, Lynch, Papa. And I said, yes, man, for real. It's an influence on Chad. And so I'm really grateful, dude. And this was a really cool time. And of course, I love talking with you on the show, Chad.
Yes. What you were just saying about there's something really, really satisfying about turning somebody onto something, be it music or David Lynch. There's something really satisfying about somebody just taking that ball and running with it. That doesn't always happen. Not everybody's going to connect with what you connect with, but when someone does, it's very gratifying. So yeah, that's cool to hear, man. I'm glad that you and I can share that love for something so oddball.
Dude, and it is totally oddball, man. And it's a bummer because I know that we don't want to make this the David Lynch show, right? Like, because we do mention him a lot, but he's a big impact. I mean, this is a really big, it's a really cool deal. And so I'm looking forward also to learning more about even people like Kubrick. I've watched Kubrick a couple Kubrick films, only really The Shining, and we still got to talk about that. It's gonna be a fun episode, man. Yeah, we're going to do it, right? Yeah. But to learn more about these different artists and these directors and stuff, and see how they match up, man, in time, because this has been a really cool ride. And it's always a bummer, dude, at the end of the show, because we do this once a week, man. It breaks my heart that we got to say goodbye.
Yeah, me too, man. But appreciate everybody listening. And please reach out to us. Subscribe to YouTube, to wherever it is that you subscribe podcasts to, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Deezer, iTunes, Spotify, whatever. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Email us at paleocheese, PALEOCHEEZE @gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And thanks for listening, hanging out with us.
Hi, I'm John Baldisberger, host of Madness Heart Radio. Join me each week as I discuss writing, living, life, and horror with some of the coolest people in the industry. Talk to writers, directors, actors, and really anyone at all that's involved in scaring people's pants off. Can't wait for you to join us, but until then, stay safe, but stay scared.